Hello and welcome to GTI Predictive Technology. My name is Mark Lockwood and we're here today to discuss how we build routes using our hierarchy measurements with VibePro 7.4.1. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that you understand that we can today only build routes on the iPad platform itself. There are some functions within the web app once you send that data up there to be able to manipulate RPM, bearing markers, and such. That would then need to be imported back into your iPad so that those functions, those changes that you made up there will be seen on your iPad. Anyways, let's jump into creating routes using the hierarchy measurements. And if you click on that center button, you should be on the hierarchy screen here. And we're going to go ahead and create a route. So let's click on the plant area and the keyboard will come up. We're going to click and put in GTI and then press the plus sign. And you'll see that it adds it to the column below. We want to touch that and make it gray, and then we're going to add a machine underneath that GTI plant area. And I'm just going to type in motor and hit the plus sign. And now notice when I hit the motor and make it gray, it brings up an auto points. And if I click on that, those auto points are used basically for setting up a machine pretty quickly, and will give you 3 or 6 points for a pump, a motor, or a gearbox. It is the nomenclature that you see there. If you're looking for a different nomenclature, I'm actually going to not use this and actually set up those points manually so you can see how it can be done really for any asset. So if you click on the point now that the motor's gray there, I'm going to type in the H1 and hit the plus sign twice. And the reason I do that is you see that warning, it really wants you to have one of those points velocity, the other one acceleration. So I'm going to say OK, and in order to do that I need to click up here on the top right to edit settings. Now click on the second one down and it's going to take you to the profile page here. We're going to change that to acceleration and we're going to say save and back. So now I have 1 point H1, both velocity and acceleration. I then click on that H1 and turn it into a V1 because we're going to look at a vertical location as well. And we're going to hit the plus sign twice. Again, it's going to warn me. I'm going to go to the second one down, change it to acceleration, save and back. I then going to add a couple more points here. I'm going to add an H2. Again, clicking that plus sign twice. I will need to put the keyboard down to get to that second one down. Save and back, and then one more point I'm going to add, and that will be the V1. And we're going to hit the plus sign twice. Well, as you see, it's telling me I did the wrong one. I got an error. I really needed to put V2. And believe me, we'll make mistakes, so this is just how you would get around doing that. Once you understand, the system will warn you. So the second one down, I'm going to change again to save and back. And now I have my 4 points created. I've got an H1, a V1, an H2, and a V2, both velocity and acceleration for every one of them. So now let's go in and actually profile these points. So if we go into that H1 velocity, you'll see there's an Fmax there. If you have something that's really fast, you know, maybe a 70K Bryant spindle, you really need to open that up to the 300K Fmax so that you could see that running speed in the spectral. So for now we're going to leave it at 60K. We're going to look at a typical 3600 motor. So I'm going to turn on the RPM marker and I'm going to put in the 3600. And I've got it in there for that point, and you'll see right next to the RPM the copy button. And if you hit the copy and say OK, and then save and back, it basically copied that to every single one of these points. You can go into any one of these points now and see that the RPM marker has been duplicated across the board. So I'm going to cancel back out and go into the top again, the H1 velocity. Now this is a velocity reading. You can put in bearing fault frequencies for bearings if you want to. You can use that. Typically that would be done on an acceleration reading. But I can, for my thresholds, use custom, or I can actually use the ISO chart. And you'll see there's the ISO chart listed here under the I. And I'm going to use a typical small motor group 2 rigid, and it's going to use that 0618 that you see there. I can also, if I had the temperature sensor on my wireless, I could put in a temperature that I don't want to exceed, and that would be then the temperature threshold I would use. I also have a custom value where I could enter whether that would be for pressure or current or run out, really any of those things could be trended using the program and being able to collect that when you collect the vibration data. So this is, as you see over here in the measurement direction, a horizontal location that we're going to be looking at, and I'm going to be getting that from channel 1. I'm going to say save and back on the top left, and now that point has its threshold set in the RPM. I can go in my acceleration, and as you notice, as you come down here, that the ISO is grayed out. That's because there are no ISO settings for acceleration in Gs. A typical place to start would be at 2 and 4. And we're going to enter those in there. As you see, the keyboard came up. I say done, and now I've got my alert threshold at 2, my danger threshold at 4, and that's established again for that horizontal location. And I say save and back. Now let's go into the V1 velocity. I'm going to use down below there the same group 2 for my thresholds. I'm also over here though in my measurement direction. I need to tell the system which direction I'm actually looking at. And you can see above that where the point is a vertical point. I want to make it vertical in the direction so that when I send this data up to the web app, it's actually going to know the direction we take it, so you can take advantage of our auto detection that we have up there. So I'm going to save and back that. Go back into the V1 acceleration. Again, type in that 2 and that 4 and say done and save and back. I'm also going to go into the H2, make the group 2 for my ISO settings, save and back. My H2 acceleration, again that 2 and 4, done and save and back. And then I want to go into my V2, again group 2, but here again I need to change the direction, the measurement direction, and say save and back. I go into my acceleration, again that 2 and 4. We do not have duplicate functions for these yet. We have certainly talked about it, but for now you'd need to be able to create that the first time. And again, this is a V, so I want to change that to a vertical location. So now that I've established these, all of these, and have them done, what I can do is add a photo to that particular asset to I understand what this asset is. So I can click on the H1, really any of the points, and then I come down to the bottom left where it says edit create, and I click on the edit create, and now you'll see I come into a template here where I can take a photo. So if I click on take picture, and then I actually take the photo of the asset that I have in front of me, I can then use that photo, and it's going to drop it into that reporting template. I can basically move the arrows. So as you see, all I'm doing is literally putting my finger on the arrows, and I'm moving them around, and I'm setting them where I would normally take these particular readings. Obviously I don't have an axial position on this motor, but you can see I've identified where I would take these readings, and you can see I'm moving this around. And then I can take the labels that are on the top and actually use those to be able to identify those points. And as you can see, I can do up to 12 different locations. And once I have that really the way I want it, showing all of my locations, I can say save and back on the top left there. And once I save it there, I can say save and back again, and now that photo is literally under every one of those points and ready to be used to collect data. So let's just say that we have the ability now we have a machine that's right next to this machine that's pretty much identical to that machine. What I want to do is go out of here. I'm going to have bottom left arrow. I'm going to arrow out. I'm going to go into my settings. And then at the bottom right, you see edit plants, machines, points, and route. So if I click on that and turn it on and then go back into my hierarchy measurements, you'll see that now I have editing capabilities in all of those columns. So if I click on the GTI, I want to basically duplicate the motor that's there, so I'm going to click the edit in the motor column. And my question is, which one do I want to edit? Well, I want to edit that motor, so I want to click on it. And then I'm going to click duplicate. It will make a copy. I then want to click on that copy and then click on the top where it says the motor copy, and then I want to actually change it to what I want to change it to, and I'm just going to say motor 1, and then I'm going to say change name. And if I say done in the column there, you'll see that now I've created a second motor, and if I click on it, it's actually identical as far as what the settings are, the photo that's in there, the thresholds, the RPM, and everything. Now, if you're measuring the same measurement locations, however, the photo might be a little different, you can always go in there, delete the photo, and be able to add another photo and add those location markers to be able to show people where you're taking those measurements from. So I can actually do this again. I'm going to edit. I'm going to click on the motor. I'm going to click on that motor I want to duplicate, and you can see it created another copy. I click on that copy, again go to the top, and I'm going to put in 2 right there. And then I'm going to say change name. And you can see that they're actually out of order. Well, one of the other editing capabilities is I can edit, and in those lines that you see on the right hand side, I can actually hold those and then drag the asset in. So this is really good for adding a new asset and kind of where you want to add it to and where you want to put it in your route. We're going to say done. Typically when I'm done editing, I want to turn that back off so somebody doesn't inadvertently go in there and make a change. So let's go back into settings. Let's turn that off, and then we'll come back into the hierarchy. So I've basically set these 3 motors up. I've been doing a lot on the edit settings. Let's just stay in the vibration spectrum now and actually go into that motor, and now I'm actually going to be collecting data. So if I click on that H1 velocity, put my accelerometer in that location and click on it, this is now collecting data. Obviously, as you notice, this is actually picking up my voice. We're not actually looking at a spectral of a particular motor, but you can see that it has the plant area that's there, the asset, and the measuring location all up there on the top left. You can see your RPM marker, and all you have to do from here is literally wait for the sensor to settle, and then go ahead and hit save and back. And you'll see for me it automatically check marked that off. I can go into my acceleration here and say save and back, and again it check marks it off. That check mark is available because in my settings, and if I go back in there, you can see the time period up on the top right there, time period between routes. As long as I have a number of days, whether that be 30 days, so I would collect every month, or 90 days, basically what's going to happen for you there is that in the route as you take it, it will show you those check marks, and then in 30 days they would go back to clocks. So that's just really a way to help keep track of when you're actually taking the route. You're inevitably going to get interrupted. This way you'll know exactly where you left off. So I'm going to put the accelerometer on V1. I'm going to click that. Again, save and back. We'll stay on that same point. Click that and collect that data as well. Now typically if I see a problem in those collections of looking at those, what I do like about our system is that it's live, so I'm seeing what's happening. But if I see something happen there that I really want to get more data on, I can do something called a record time waveform. And if I click on record time waveform, underneath whatever point I want to put it, let's say I'm still on my H1, or put it back on my H1, I can now look at from 1 to 6 seconds of a time waveform. So here I'm looking to collect 3 seconds. I can hit record, and it will record. As you see, it's again getting my voice there, and it will give me that time waveform. I say save and back. Now that is saved under that particular point. I do have the ability to do a couple of other things using this. I showed you here the GPS. You can actually create your route, wherever location you're in. When you get to the location that you're at, the top button up there on the left-hand side next to plant area, there's a little pin. So you can then, once you're at the location you're actually taking it at, you can press that and it will say save actual GPS location to this plant and say OK. So now you have the GPS set correctly for that. Important to have the technician name in there. The technician name will show up underneath the reading when it was collected. So important to have that done by whatever technician may be going out that particular day. And then you'll see on the bottom right hand side here that I can use a QR code. Once you take this database and send it up to the web app, it will automatically create QR codes for every one of your machines, one of your assets. And then you can use this look-through feature, and literally it just uses the camera to go to the QR code. I don't have a QR code right here to just pop it into, but that would literally take you right to a particular asset in your list. So if you had a lot in the list, you could, once done, send it up to the web app, print out all of those QR codes, laminate them, and put them on the machines, and then use them as part of your route. So that's pretty much setting up, collecting, and what you can do here in the hierarchy setup. Now let's go view our data. So when we go on to click on view our data, literally we just have one more column. We've got the same thing we were looking at, and then we have basically the measurement column. And you'll see that the measurements that I took, obviously these are bogus readings. You can see when I toggle on record time waveform that the time waveform will then show up. Again, I can't do anything really with the time waveform. I can look at it here. I can really do everything with the time waveform up on the web app, where I can turn that into velocity, acceleration, or displacement, and being able to use that up there. We can also use something called HFI demodulation when we take a time waveform, and that will allow you to really accentuate the bearing frequencies to see what's going on in the bearing realm. So what I'm going to do quickly here, since this is just some bogus data and kind of a bogus route that we set up, I'm actually going to get some real data, and I'm going to actually go to my import from my database. I'm going to import from my Dropbox. I've got a database in there with some data that we can look at, and as you see, it took a minute. Now it's success, and it's telling me to close the app. So I'm going to just close the application and then bring it back up, and now in my viewer trends I actually have some data in here. So this is just loading another database onto the iPad. Understand that one database can live on the iPad. When I bring something else onto the iPad, I just overwrote what was there. So you certainly want to be, sending, if you have multiple databases, sending that database up to the web app and backing up that file so that you don't lose your data. So you'll see here that I can actually look at this measurement point. I can look at a recorded time waveform. Recorded spectrum. So if I go into there, I can see this. The first button I want to hit is on the bottom left called scale. That's going to scale it back to what it was when I took it. So this is an auto scaling system, but you want to get it to where it was. And as you can see here, I'm a little bit high on the 0.12 inches per second. And if you look at the top 6 frequencies there on the right, 0.1186 of that is coming from that one-time running speed. So we've got a little bit of imbalance there. I can look at the overall trend. If I click on that point now, I can see what's gone on from a trending perspective. You can see I was red. Now I'm down here to green, and then back up to yellow. This is where I would also do my trending and my temperature and my custom value that we talked about earlier. So on this vibration spec, you can see that I'm red, green. The question is, how did I go from red to green here? And if I click on machine maintenance or maintenance event, you'll see that there's a little half moon there on that red reading. And if I click on it, it's telling me literally that that this was an imbalance issue, and we balanced this thing with our balancing program. That allows us then to really capture the story behind what's gone on with this asset. How did it go from that red to the green? You've got multiple ways that you can identify. You can put in misalignment. that will show two things that are misaligned. You can put in, obviously, the imbalance you saw. You can do the bearing fault, and then you can actually do the other or none that will give you a wrench. This is also how we get all of our other application reports into the maintenance event. I have a little button down here, that little arrow button in the square. If I click on that, this gives me access to my external reports that I've brought into the VibePro program. This is a copy of a VibeRMS report. This would be maybe, you had a situation where you were taking a quarterly route and a month into it you changed out a motor. Well, you could do a VibeRMS report, type it in as far as the action and notes up here that it was changed out, and this is the baseline of the as installed condition, and then that can be included as a maintenance event and be available up on the web app as well to tell you what's going on with that particular asset. So from here, we've collected our data, we've viewed the data here, we have the ability here from a file perspective to be able to get this data off of the iPad. If I click on databases, I really have 4 different ways to get this file, as you see, VibePro SQLite, off of the iPad. I can email it on that bottom left there. It will work, and at some point it will literally get just too big to be able to do that. So you'll probably go to a different method. I can send it to the Dropbox, and the Dropbox is a good way to have a backup. I can also send it to our web app, and this is going to be probably the easiest way to send your data up to be able to do your reporting up there, as well as download a copy onto your computer, whether that's Windows or Apple, and be able to save that file so that you have a backup of what you're doing there. The other way is to connect this directly to a computer and treat the iPad as if it were a hard drive. You can also do it that way. The additional, really, from an editing perspective, what happens is the most typical is when someone goes into an asset, they click on the wrong location and they save data accidentally under a location that they did not intend to. What you can do from there is get back out of here with the bottom arrow left, go into the viewer trends and reports, and now you can see that data that was collected on this point here, and I can literally delete that just by sliding left. Now let's talk a little bit about deleting. If you do need to delete a machine or a point, you really need to be deleting from the right to the left. So if I were to delete this GTI predictive, as you can see, and I slide, if I were to delete that and then go back into the database here, the only number that would change there out of the 2 plants, the 8 machines, the 18 points, and 17 measurements is the 2. All of those other machines and measurement points and measurements associated to that point would still be in the database connected to nothing. So it makes good sense when you're deleting to delete again from the right to the left. So you want to get rid of all your measurements, all your points, your machines and plant areas if you were trying to delete like that. The rule is that in the hierarchy measurements, this is where you're going to add your data. It's also going to be where you collect your data, and then the viewer trends and reports is where you're going to view that data as well as delete anything you need to delete. One other feature I want to talk about is going to be available here if I go and I'm just clicking to see if I had my edit points, plants, machines, and routes turned on, and I want to turn that on to show you one other feature. I'm going to go into the viewer trends and reports, back into database, and you'll notice on the bottom right hand side you see reset database and leave so many measurements. What this really is an archive feature. You would take the database as you have it on your system, send it up to the web app, and then download that onto your computer and create a file folder for the archive of that data and put that away. This would be as that data, as you've collect, maybe 1 year or 2 years worth of data and it's getting pretty big. You can then use this reset database, and I would typically use 3 readings. 3 readings is a good trend. And this would basically delete every other reading taken, leaving in place the structure, all of the measurement points, all the thresholds, everything that you had set. Again, I encourage you to turn this type of a function off. And again, that's in settings when you are not in an editing mode or in, backing up your database for an archive. It makes good sense to do that. Again, I just want to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please feel free to call us at 603-669-5993. Thanks again.